we will continue with the workshop, our title on literature review. So this is a continuation. The first workshop, we said it focused on research topic, the use of literature, suggestions for using literature in planning different types of studies, steps in conducting a literature review. Then the second workshop, which was last Thursday, the focus was on literature review map of the research, a priority for selecting literature material, definition of terms, and comparison and contrasting. Now, today, we were left with few, I think we were left with three. We were left with one, two, aspect one, number one and number two, as well as the last one. But I added 4 topics, subtopics or subjects that we will also look at. And the entire session will focus on abstracting studies, criteria for literature, how much literature, and I think this, how much, I think might have been a question that was hovering in our minds. The other one, someone has already focused on my topic. We'll try to shed light on that one, or to do a little bit of a discussion on it. Then we will from there go to organizational approaches, the 2 of them. And then writing strategy, which is meal. Then we do the last one, which is the myth of outdated literature. And we start today with the first subject, which is abstracting studies. When researchers write reviews of the literature for proposed studies, they locate articles and develop brief abstracts of the articles that comprise the review. I want to say that last week I made reference to an abstract, and in that case I presented a slide which was an extract from the South African Journal of Botany. And the intention was to show how quickly one can use an abstract to determine if the literature or the article is valuable or it is relevant to the topic under investigation. So, but today here, we're going to look at how we create an abstract from literature that we have read. That is why it says an abstract is a brief review of the literature, typically a short paragraph, and it summarizes major elements to enable a reader to understand the basic features of the article. Remember, let me propose that this is just one step or one activity that is entailed in literature review. We are aware that we are going to look at a number of literature, a lot of sources, books, articles, and reports. Now, when you are looking at those sources, those articles, sometimes you don't immediately write them in your discussion sections. But what happens is you might do a number of summaries, or you can summarize every article every chapter or every section of a book that is relevant to the study. So that is why here reference is made to the summarizing of major elements that enable a reader to understand the basic features of the article. So at a later stage, the researcher will be able to use all the abstracts that he or she had made of all the consulted material. And that is when you are now to write down the discussion, the literature that you've reviewed. In developing an abstract, researchers need to consider what material to extract and summarize. And we've already indicated there in an earlier statement that these should be major elements to enable a reader to understand the basic features of the article. So that which need to be considered are major elements. Now, this is important information when reviewing perhaps dozens, if not hundreds of studies. And earlier on, I indicated, remember these abstracts are done for, if it is done for every material that a researcher handles. So it might be hundreds of these materials. Now, a good summary of research study reported in a journal might include the following points. And this, all the time, I will want to indicate that what I present are guidelines. And I've said other authors might approach what we're presenting differently. So we take this as an advice that we can use. So when we read other sources or other literature, if we are advised otherwise, we must decide what to take and what not to take. And as long as what we use in our reports, we are able to justify. So we are looking at what is suggested as part and parcel of what should be contained in the abstracts for each of the reviewed literature material. It is suggested. Mention the problem being addressed, that is a fact. State the central purpose of focus of the study. Briefly, state information about the sample, population, or subjects. Review key results that relate to the to the proposed study. If it is critic or methods review, point out technical methodological flaws in this study. And I also want to indicate that we must remember these guidelines or these suggestions are what we are going to discuss would be contained in various sections of the literature review when we do the final write-up. So the guidelines indicate what is going to be reduced into writing, into the literature section or into the literature chapter. When examining a study to develop a summary, there are places to look for these parts, and I think we're going to be advised here as part of our guidelines. In well-crafted journal articles, the problem and purpose statements are clearly stated in the introduction. So if you go to the introduction where we are advised, that is where we will find the problem and the purpose statements. Information about sample, population, or subject is found midway through in a method or procedure section, and the results are often reported towards the end. And I think most of us are aware that if you're talking about sample population and subjects, here you're talking about the approach, you're talking about the procedure, and it is a process. These are procedural things that relate to the methods of conducting the research. So articles will always have this section. Some articles would call it materials and methods. Others might say methodological justification, or others might just refer it to the methods. So we are aware where to find this. It will be simple for us. And you must remember now that we said last week on Thursday that research is also by default part of what constitutes literature review. Because when you talk about the procedure and the methods, you're talking about a scientific approach. And this is what we were told at the beginning of our workshops, when we have to consider something that is scientific, that it should indicate that it is systematic. And the research section, the procedure section, or the material and methods section, that is where our system is contained. And we would be required in chapter 1, or when we prepare proposals, to use literature, scientific literature that talk about research methods or the procedure for conducting research. So in other words, we are going to be prepared. Here, the guidelines are assisting us to get prepared to ensure that even at the end of literature review, we shall have summarized aspects that pertain to the procedure or the research process. So when we summarize it here, we will eventually migrate it to the literature section, which is under the methodology. In the results sections, look for passages in which the researchers report information to answer or address each research question or hypothesis, because you see, when you discuss, it's important to look at the results. Here, that is where questions are answered and hypotheses. And these are important for a person who's going, who requires specific arguments on specific subjects. And do remember, the results are now subject specific. If they're talking about the role of vendor in nature, the role of vendor culture in nature conservation, and the results are about plants, then if someone is interested in conducting research related to culture and nature conservation, so this is important to understand how other studies, what were the findings from other studies. And if you go to articles always report contemporary information. They report the current. And there, that is where you get well acquainted with the discourse in the subject. And that's why the results section is so important. There is an information here that addresses the research question or hypothesis. For book length research articles, look for the same points. We have just done the first presentation, and this was the first subject today on abstracting studies.
Okay, am I right in understanding, as you say, journals are usually most recent, in understanding that when I work on my research, I should consider journals more than the books? Am I right in thinking like that?
Yes, even on Thursday, the guideline from the presentation was that journals were prioritized above books, and even above dissertations. And dissertations were actually at the lowest because journals are current. Remember, we spoke about a journal that was published this year, which captured 2023 and 2024 articles. And that journal is available now. And I can tell you, next year, it was from the South African Journal of Botany. And I tell you, this year, they've even organized a conference. And in that conference, I tell you, there's going to be proceedings. So proceedings will also be very, very current because they will be this year. And if these people hold conferences every year, it means this year's proceedings, papers presented there, next year. So you have got an article almost every year. And I said, it is possible that a researcher can write an article every year, but you cannot write a good book every year because a book is is thick, it's large, 100 or 200 pages, 150. But an article, sometimes from 15 pages, you can even go up to 30. But you see, imagine 15 pages and a book of 200. You cannot produce this almost every time. So articles, highly recommended. And the other thing with articles are about research. It's a work where you pose a question or you put a hypothesis, you go and conduct research, collect data, analyze, and provide answers. But a book is writing sometimes about a theory. Oh, it's not about research. A book is not about research. So that is why articles are highly recommended and prioritized high.
Just quickly, as you were going through that slide, Prof, and then just a picture doing on my head that the abstract, it's first on the document but written last, because looking at what you've presented, I would need to write my whatever proposal or dissertation. When it's complete, then I write the abstract after. Am I correct?
Okay. There are two types of abstracts. The abstracts that I presented last week is actually an abstract that is written up front, at the beginning of the article in a journal. And I noted that even reports, theses, and dissertations do have abstracts. So that one, when I made reference to it and presented it last week, the point was to show how quickly one can identify if the source, the article, or the book is relevant to the study. That was the main purpose. So the discussion today is about when you are doing literature review, how do you summarize sources that you have read? And the terminology that they use, that summary is referred to as an abstract. Maybe the terminology abstract might refer to a summary of the content of the report or of a book or an article. So today we are summarizing for the purpose of using these summaries. So if I've read 100 articles, I would have 100 abstracts, so that when I now synthesize my discussion, when I start the write-up of the literature for my literature chapter, I use these abstracts. So the process of abstracting here mainly refers to that one. But I think you are correct. We will sometimes, when we talk about a research proposal, and when we talk about presenting the research report, we will make reference to an abstract to the report, to the research report. And I think, but your description and your analysis on when it should be written and where it should sit is actually at the beginning, and it is written at the end. It is compiled at the end when the study has been concluded. I think you are right in that one.
So here we're talking about the abstract. So in a scientific standard way of writing, there will be an introduction, that's one. There will be literature review. 2, there will be methodology. 3, then there's results and discussion. 4, then there's finally conclusion and recommendations. So let's say here on this on the part of abstract, I just want some clarity on the because of, well, I have seen a lot of abstract, but you'll find that in those lot of abstracts that I've seen, you will not find anyone, maybe you will not find a Corombi ETL 2020 being referenced there in the abstract. However, I just feel like, yes, I see the presentation that you've given us is wonderful and I've been following it closely. Why is it not, why is that you don't find anyone being cited in the abstract? Why is that so?
This is a personal view. I have not read anything about it, but we can just look at the reason and the need for the abstract, because an abstract actually summarizes the report, because you will find there it makes reference to the issue and the problem under investigation. It also makes reference to the methods. It can also make reference to the findings, the results, even what the final, even if there are recommendations, it can do that. So in other words, it summarizes the entire work. And where I read it, somebody was even recommending that it should be just one paragraph. And I felt, how much can you write in one paragraph? But this might be the reason why you would not find anything referenced there. And I don't know how I can better explain, but you see, it's mainly about your work. You're not citing, and you're not citing anybody. It's you who has done it. It's the product of your work. Then you're putting it in summary.
Okay, so could it happen that there is a wrongly written abstract?
So have you seen one referenced?
No, I haven't. I was just concerned. It was out of curiosity, but I think you are explaining correctly that this is mainly your work as a student, or your work as a candidate. But I think there is something. I was just concerned as to, like, why is it that on abstract you don't find it, you don't find a reference there. But when you go, it's more like what an abstract does. It just ignores the literature review.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
And we will still talk about abstracts. Let's agree that we must not close this discussion. Let's put it open. And when we talk about the presentation of results, or even somewhere where an abstract is required, I think in some proposals, I noted that other guidelines do require people to put abstracts in a proposal. So let us say when we discuss that aspect, we can revisit it. And on that basis, we can do further research, and we can debate it further and to improve our understanding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good evening.
This is not much of a question as of a comment on what the last colleague raised on the issue of the abstract. As I understand it, it's, as you correctly put it, a summary of what we have done. It's more of a bird's view of your report. You are giving the reader a bird's view of what is contained in your report, doing it in your own ways. Having done the work yourself, it's like telling a story of an event that we have seen. You think of it as a window into a building or a house. You are able to see what's inside the house without necessarily knowing where each furniture has been bought from, but at least to have a picture of what is inside that house. That's my 2 cents worth of explanation of what an abstract, why you can have references there. And I think it's not so much different from your executive summary, if you something like those. But
Yes.
what I wanted to also raise, Prof, here is to contextualize the usage of the word abstract. To say in the context of research, the first colleague asked about it is the first thing in the report, but it's written last. I think is correct. In the context of research, an abstract would be written after you have done your report. That's why you are summarizing the journey that you have traveled from the beginning to the end. You're summarizing it to give a reader that better view. Now, when you are summarizing or when you are doing your literature review, I find it a bit confusing to be referring to those summaries as abstract. I'm sure in English it's correct, but in the context of research, it might be creating a confusion because in the context of research, abstract is used as that last summary that you write after you've finished everything. But when you are still doing a review, you are extracting, I guess you are extracting, which is correct in terms of English grammar, but not necessarily correct in research lingo. So I think that's where the confusion might be.
Okay.
I stand to be corrected, Prof. Thank you.
No, you are right. I actually, my English is not very good. I do agree. And you see the books that we read, they are written by people. Some of them are from overseas. Some of them are from South Africa. So even in overseas, the language usage is so different. So this person who writes that, I think he might have, the terminology can confuse other people. But there is a good word there that can replace that, summaries. And I think I did say something about it, but in most cases I was referring to this as abstracts. But we can change, and I agree that we can use the word summary so that to avoid the confusion that you have made reference to. I don't have a problem with that one. Can we continue now? There's another example that I want to to present here to explain something that we worked on Thursday last week. This slide introduces me to the work that I have done, and I want to use it to make a follow-up on the literature map that we presented last week on Thursday. So I also want to link it with the type of literature search that I did when searching for information and literature that should support my studies. And I happened to find information contained in this slide. And it says, what are good criteria for a literature review? And these are again guidelines, suggest that these are the criteria that must be met when you do literature review. Depending on the nature of the study, the criteria should include comprehensiveness, that in other words, all past and existing knowledge. And where you see the red is my answer in terms of the project entitled The Role of Venda Culture in Nature Conservation. And this is the literature that we used to build our mind map that we looked at on Thursday. So I said, does my literature review have all past and existing knowledge? I said yes, because you would see, and I would again indicate to you, I said on Thursday, and there was a lot of old literature, But I also identified few authors that presented recent literature, and we also used it to build the literature map. And it means the information was part and parcel of the literature section. Then the other criteria, the literature should be specific, or specificity should be there, focusing on a topic. Then to that criterion, I responded that the literature that I had did not necessarily was not necessarily specific to the topic, because the topic there, as I said, is about conservation, and through I was looking at the role of the Venda culture, and at the time there was nothing that said something about nature conservation and the Venda culture. So my response was no, it is not, sorry. It's not like that. Authority, and I also said no, most of the authors and most of the literature that was used in that study did not come to people that are known as authorities in the subject, in nature conservation and the Venda culture. They were not there because the literature, as I said, was very general. There was literature on history, there was literature on education, there was literature on tourism. So all of those could not be considered to be have been produced by authorities on nature conservation. So my response was no, the literature was general. Currency, latest thinking and writing in the field. Then I said no, the literature review was, you see, the literature sources were predominantly historical. So it was not the latest thinking, because there were very few authors who wrote something that was relevant to the topic in the current by then. Availability, the material was not even available because I had to go to the library physically, and I had to search this material from sources that were not specifically on nature conservation. That is why I said the material was not necessarily relevant. Exclusion, then I said this was not applicable. And in the next slides, I will zoom in some of the literature extracts, some statements, and I will even indicate the author. So I will indicate whether this was old or it was current, and I would even indicate the discipline to which the statement belongs. Even the reference itself, I've just even written how I would have written it at the list of as part of the list of literature. So you could see the title, you could see that it is either history or it is tourism related or it is education related. Now, while I was reading another literature, some people argue that in almost all cases, there has been extensive previous work related to one's topic or research work. And this is what I want to contrast or to compare with what with how the literature in my case looked like. Was it there or it was not there? Then we can make a conclusion after this presentation. If this is not the case, if this is not the case, the researcher might be trying to research something too innovative in terms of student research project. There will usually be earlier industry and academic material written that will be directly related to the student topic or aspects of the research, such as the methodology or scales used previously. So the argument is that most of the topic would have some reference available because some work might have been done on the topic. So it means that sources, literature would be available to support the study. In many cases, there will not be an exact fit between what has been written and student research. And this one, I tend to agree more with this one. As I saw in my case, some of the things that have been found were implicit. They were not very specific. They were not very specific to the topic that I was actually investigating. And they say this does not mean that there is no relevant literature, rather you may be applying ideas from areas in a slightly different way or drawing on literature from other disciplines. And I think in my case, the latter is relevant. Now, the study on the role of Venda culture in nature conservation was carried out in 1997. At that time, there were few sources that were closer to the subject. This is me now, and this is not anybody's guideline. So it is when I did an analysis to find out how relevant it was. And this is also in line with the earlier slide, which referred to the criteria on literature. In most cases, an inference was made from sources that focused on historical and cultural studies. So we made an inference, and when we were presenting the literature map, we did mention this a lot. Most of the literature was old, even dating back to 1929. Such as the literature by Harris and the other one, 1960, by Van Warmelo. So the literature was very old. Others could even consider this as outdated. But at that time, this was the available literature that could support the study. Even if by inference or by implication, we did take a lot of information that gave background to the study in terms of the literature review. The latest were by Van der Waal and in 1994 and 1997, and I did indicate that it was Mabogo and Van der Waal, and both of them wrote from a conventional perspective. They were all researchers who were from the University of Venda. They were lecturers. The other one was a professor. They belonged to the Department of Zoology, whereas the other one belonged to the Department of Botany. So when I'm going to the next slides, I will always want us to keep at the back of our mind this literature map that I referred to on Thursday. And most of these authors have been captured in the next slides, and I will be able to make reference to them. And you can remember state subheadings such as history, education, and tourism, because this is what you are going to see in the next slides, and I would want to make reference to that to show that when I said there were sources that were just generic, indeed they were, because I would have extracted some statements that made me to organize this mind map in that fashion. And here, I start presenting Matiba. And we said that Matiba he wrote something, and he was actually, it was completing a thesis or a dissertation. He was completing a master's studies, and he wrote something in relation to the natural resources and the relationship with the Venda culture. And the statement reads like this, and this is an extract from the literature review section. In times of war, chiefs take the lead in defending their land from hostile invaders. And I said this was historical and cultural practice. But look at how I listed this reference at the end of the study, and so you could see the discipline to which it belongs. Reference says, okay, Matiba RN 1985, the Berlin missionary vendor in education. You see now, it was an educational study. Chakuma vendor, there he was investigating something with respect to 1872 and 1954. There it is unpublished Master of Education dissertation from the University of North, which is Solvenga. It is the present University of Limpopo. And I, there, when I conclude, indicate that this was an educational study. And remember, mine was a conservation, a nature conservation study. So here I was just indicating, proving to you that what I had in the mind map indeed is supported by what came from the literature review section. And here is Davenport, who wrote a history book. What he wrote, what we took from him is that Davenport in 1991 also states that whites who wanted to hunt in the territory occupied by the vendor had to first get permission, which often entailed presenting the chief with guns. And look at the reference there. Davenport TRN 1991, South Africa, a modern history. That is why I said this was a history book. It was not a nature conservation book. So I was correct in referring it as such from the mind map, from the literature map. The other one, who I said is wrote in terms from a Western perspective, and whose sources were recent by then, because if the studies was conducted in 1997, he also wrote his article in 1997. According to Van der Waal, 1997, foreigners may not enter Lake Funduzi without special permission. If they do, they may anger the spirits who live in the lake and so bring punishment to the Chivenda clan, to the Chiawa clan, who are the custodians of the lake. And the reference there, Van der Waal, BCW 1997, Funduzi, a unique, sacred, and unknown South African lake. South African Journal of Aquatic Science. This one was very relevant because aquatic science is natural science. So nature conservation and water, there is something, one of my subheading is conservation of water, as you see there at the top. So this was very, very relevant. He's one of the authors who wrote relevant, the topic which was relevant, and it was not a very old source by then. And the other one is VDC Undated, also states that the Bavenda believed to disturb the stones around Chipise may enrage the python and so cause the water to dry up. Because these traditional beliefs created a deep respect for most water resources among the Bavenda, water resources could be maintained in a more or less undisturbed condition. You see now, why I took it is that it says water resources could be maintained. Maintenance is conservation, is part of the conservation process. So, but the reference is not a conservation source. It's not a conservation literature. It is. It says Venda Development Corporation, undated there, Venda Land of Legend by Lawton Communications, Rand Park Ridge. The reason why I say it is tourism, I know the author, VDC, was the Venda Development Corporation, and that the extract was from one of the documents which was used to promote tourism, cultural tourism in Venda by then. So this is a bit relevant as tourism includes aspects of ecotourism. So I was lenient in saying that, or at least I know that if I've investigated ecotourism, it contributes to the conservation of natural resources because the tourist attractions are actually include some of the natural resources. So this was more or less there. In the other one, still under the conservation of water, according to Bavenda myth, no one can wash himself or herself or his or her clothes in Lake Funduzi. This is by Jordan 1987. Or that person cannot wash a sooty pot No person can wash a sooty pot in the fountain called Chamakambo. Van Warmelo also said that. This is the person that I referred to earlier on. So look at the two authors and their references. Jordan, SP 1987. The literature is The Republic of Venda. You see, it's just entitled The Republic of Venda. So this is the reason why I said it is a history book as well. There we see the even the publisher in Pretoria. And the last author, Van Warmelo, NJ 1960, Ethnological Publications 3, Contributions Towards Venda History, Religion and Tribal Rituals. So the rituals, the religion, and this history, then from it we extracted, because we noted that it talks about the relationship between the Venda and the water sources. But the book was historical. Mabogo, who I said wrote from a Western perspective, because he was one of the lecturers. He has made a careful review of the ethnobotany of the Bavenda. Then he found that trees like Sclerocaria berea, which is marula, Parinari curatelifolia, which is mabula plum, and Adonsonia digitata, which is baobab, have reputedly saved the nation during times of drought and food scarcity. So the person was speaking specifically about indigenous vegetation. And look at the sub-problem there, is conservation of indigenous vegetation. So this falls under the natural science, which is also relevant. He was a lecturer under the Department of Botany. So is the Department of Natural Sciences. So his source, his literature was relevant to my studies. According to Nechungani and Van Wyk, people who handle Brackenridgia, Zangweberica, without performing certain rituals may be afflicted with madness and death. This is but one example of the way in which the ritualized sanctity of the various trees and plants promotes the sustainability and survival. So this is very relevant. By the way, one of the authors here was my first supervisor when I got employed under the Venda Herbarium. So the source is Nechungan Ian and Van Wyk, AE 1980, Mutabatsindi, mysterious plant from Venda, Feld and Flora. Feld and Flora is this journal which focused on indigenous vegetation. The articles are about that in mainly. And when I finish this one, I think it will be the last. If it's not the last, I'm going to skip because we have got enough example. By the way, I think it is sufficient, even if I don't go through it. But as the others, this is a historical novel. Somebody was writing about the sacred baboons of Ramondo. And something that is very interesting is that this source is the oldest of all the sources that I've consulted, and it was written in 1929. So here I was justifying that the literature that I actually consulted and I've used from the mind map actually were a mixture, but predominantly cultural, historical, and we also saw an element of something that was tourism. And that is all if I were to say something about the criteria for the literature. Now here, you would see, I don't know if today we will still be able to talk about the outdated literature, how other people see it. But you could see that I've used a lot of old literature, but where possible, and particularly with the one from the University of Venda authors, that is where I try to even use the current by then. And let me stop here if anybody wants to make a comment again before we come to the next section or subtopic. This analysis was actually to support the literature map. So it also serves as part of making reflection on what we dealt with last week. So it's also part of for us summarizing what we did in this entire workshop.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity. Doc, I just need clarity. My supervisor advised me not to use literature that is older than 5 years, I think. I think she said I must use at least from 2016, and so that I can allow enough time for my to finish my M, and by the time I finish that, my literature is not outdated, is not old. So my challenge is I noted that you indicated that we can use an old literature, and I've got a part of a literature that is a bit old, but that forms a rich information regarding my topic, rich information on the topic that I'm doing. It's actually,
Yes.
it tells me about where it was founded and whatnot. So I just wanted to know, how do I incorporate the old literature in my proposal?
The slides that I'm going to open here have a reference to the use of old literature, outdated. You see, the upper says reference to outdated sources is a myth. And I think I'm in the middle, or I don't. And some people will argue that what we are interested on here is the quality of the literature itself. The age, the age matters. Okay, let me say that on several occasions I've repeatedly said I recommend the use of recent literature, but I also have at the back of my mind that literature is used in context. If you are writing about the history of the Zulu people, and you're talking about Shaka or Dingaan, and you want to give an account of what happened by then, or you investigate what happened by then, in that, then you give it a time period, then you would only investigate maybe the time frame 1862 to 1890. Eh? I tell you that old literature will be very, very useful for you there. And I don't dispute that recent literature can be useful, because there are people today that are writing about that history. But there are people who wrote about that history or that event by then. You see, the two are so relevant. And even before today, after 1890, and from 1890 to today, people might have been writing. Those that had interest on the Zulu history, and specifically with reference to Dingaan or to Shaka, they might have been writing. So you would find that there are different dates, there are different perspectives of writing it. And the research topic will dictate to you what you need to cite and what you should not cite. And sometimes you will lose information. You need to ground your study on the background. Sometimes our background stems from the history or from old literature. So, but there is a challenge when you're writing about current things that do not have a history. Why would you write? Why would you put emphasis on old literature? Eh? And I cannot say don't use old literature. I cannot say use old literature only. You see, so I trend in between. So the slides that I have here, and I want to put a disclaimer. This does not come from a journal, and this does not come from a book. It comes from from Google, and just not even Google Scholar. And I want to say that I hunted, and I could only find, there was one journal. I could not find time to make an extract of the statements, but the statements are more or less what I've captured in here. And if I had put that one here, I was going to even indicate who the authors were. And And what was written there was not exactly research on the use of data or recent or outdated literature. It was just opinion that people said, and others even supporting. I even saw an opinion from a person from the University of South Africa in that article who was arguing like upper, indicating that the usage and the date of the literature then is dictated to by what you are researching. This is what I can say at this stage. But I think maybe I won't have time to come to these slides because it is at the end. I just put it in here in case we find time to discuss it. Then I would present it, then we can discuss statement by statement so that we can have our views in here. But the important thing is that let us be broad-minded when we do our studies. If we use old literature, then it should be justified and we should be able to defend that.
Okay, I hear and I understand what you are saying, Doctor, and thank you very
Yes.
much for that. But what also come to my mind about the old literature, I think that depends also on your topic. Like when you look on the topic for health, like we're talking about, for example, HIV and AIDS, the status of HIV and AIDS in 1981, it was an epidemic. But as we speak now, scientists and the researchers, they've brought some improvement. So I think maybe what we need to check which information do I need here? Is it an information that maybe scientifically there are some improvement and progress that have been made? Or is the information that help me to get the background of whatever I'm researching about? That's what comes to my mind as you speak. I don't know if I'm wrong.
I think you're doing very well. To me, there is something that I will present here. There is a slide that talks about organizational approach. And what you just presented actually is also supported by another slide. But that slide was indicating how you organize your literature, that you can organize it in chronologically, and chronologically in terms of that the author is in terms of dates of events. You see, if you I think the example of health is very good. In the past, there were a lot of deaths because medical technology was not advanced, and a lot of us died by then. But as time continues, and I like what you presented, a very good case. We improve technology in medicine, and we reduce the impact of diseases. There are diseases, you see TB in the past, you must correct me because I'm not from health sciences. TB in the past might have been seen as something that cannot be cured. But today, we can even put a statement, TB can be cured. So the myth about TB as a killer, now we are saying, even if it is a killer, it is dangerous indeed, but we are able to control it, we can cure it. So in literature, when you have to write it chronologically, you can indicate the development of medical technology, the improvements in the statement that we have used, that in the 1920s, the knowledge of the medical sciences or doctors was little, but after 1930s, it improved. And then until today, when there is HIV, we are not even dying. We have lost relatives through HIV, but as technology improved, today they're not dying. And that has impact on people that are investigating topics that are related to HIV. So I would be surprised if I'm reading something on HIV and I don't hear about its history, where it started, how people became competent in managing it, how we died there, how we are able to live with it, and it cannot even be seen that we are HIV positive. So I thank you very much for that beautiful example.
Just a comment from Kelvin here. Yeah, no,
Yes.
I think I have to say this. I love the stories of pythons being enraged and the baboons being treated. Like, I love those stories, and I think those are true African stories, because of and I just love how you were able to relate it. You made your presentation interesting though, because I had a laugh really. A python that can be in rent, So no, thanks for that, man. I enjoyed it.
It's my pleasure.
Okay. Yes, just a little comment, and then I would ask my question. From the discourse so far, I picked up that if you're doing a research that is historical, I think sources that are quite closer in terms of timeline to that historical event will serve as a more accurate sources, because they were closer to when the event actually happened, and rather than taking a source as quoting a source that is way the timeline is vast, one would not, the accuracy of your investigation might be questionable. But if it's an evolving topic or study area or research area, I think more recent studies would be key sources, because obviously they must have done a research into the past, and into your past. They are your past because they are more recent, and then you can now use them, not negating whatever is the history of your study area. Now, my question is this, and I saw it in your last slide before you moved it. When is sources enough? What amount of sources is enough for a research area, or what is too little, or what is too much when it comes to sources as a literature review? Always me outside.
You know what?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can I request you to allow me to do this presentation, because it's exactly about that, and we're going to laugh, because I don't think there is an answer, but there is a lot of suggestions. There are guidelines. The literature that I read have provided guidelines, and you will decide if you agree with this author. So we can go and consult other sources. So next time we can discuss better. But I've got a recipe that we can tease and bake and make it user-friendly for us. At the end of this subtopic, we will revisit your question, and we can discuss it better and take a decision. Using the search strategies described earlier, this should result in a list of initial primary sources on the topic of interest. At this point, the researcher needs to go through the list to determine which sources are irrelevant and should be discarded, and which will be used to write the literature review. The initial way to do this is to examine the title and abstract of each source. A common question now is as follows: when do I know when to stop looking for sources? And this is the question that you are asking. I had it before, and I think many of us had it, and some people still have it, and I don't think there's been a very good answer to it. But recall that the purpose of the review is to give a complete overview of the topic. And it means I have to be strategic. I have to understand that indeed I've provided a good overview. So in other words, you cannot do everything. That one we must agree, because there is going to be a lot of sources that you will not consult, which is also relevant to your topic. But you are taking source that will assist you to address the problem. That is why they say the purpose of the review is to give a complete overview of the topic, an overview. And there is something which people refer to as saturation. And this is a term that has many related meanings, one of which is used by several of our highlighted researchers to indicate the search for sources, that the search for source is complete. Some people use the statement saturation. I've reached saturation point on my literature review. Okay. Dodge states that it is time to stop searching for literature review sources when she sees the same citations repeatedly. Because what is the use of using the same information from this book if I got it from another book and I see this source is citing the same literature which was cited by the other one, and they're supporting the same point and the same discussion? Is there a need for me to continue to read? When I go and do literature sites, I don't find any new literature with new information. I find that they are repetitive. This is the meaning of this statement. There is a point where it seems clear you have found it all. Given ease of electronic database, you reach some type of information saturation. Oh, this is just a suggestion by a person. Branso also noted, when a person comes across the same authors, now it supports the first statement earlier. When you come across the same authors and some studies cited in numerous journal articles, saturation is reached and the search can be concluded. You know, while I was preparing this workshop, I consulted Creswell and Creswell. And when I do further literature search, actually Creswell and Creswell 2018 is a book. But on the same year, Creswell has written other articles with other authors. And Creswell might have written another article alone independently, but he wrote the book with his son. His son is a professor. He is a professor, very old. But you know what? When you read their literature, you could see that they write the same style. Their writing style and the information that they present is related, and it supports the other literature that he wrote. And even if you go to where he jointly authored an article or a book with somebody, the definition, the explanation of the concept is more or less the same. So to me, it tells me if I grasped one book of Creswell and Creswell and I want a definition of a concept, research approach, it means if I go to everywhere where he has written this book, he has written a book or an article, and I want that definition, the definition would not deviate. It won't be very far from what he defined in an earlier book. Now, do you hear now what it means? I'm actually trying to make sense of what this statement says. They say, when a person comes across the same authors and the same studies cited in numerous journal articles, you see now what happens now. The same study is repeated. Because Creswell is a known writer and is the best writer in terms of research methods. Then everybody is citing that author, citing that professor from that university. So they are saying if you repeatedly come across these aspects, then you must agree. Now, maybe you're approaching saturation. Maybe the sources might be enough. Okay, let's not take a decision now, but let's continue. We shall analyze and do a synthesis after other slides. In determining if you have enough literature, you must refer to the specifics of the assignment. Must remember, I'm covering specific aspects. If I'm talking about conservation, I'm talking about the natural resources, and it is the biophysical environment. You've got biodiversity, you've got non-living part of the environment, your water and your soil, although in them you do find life. Those are the aspects that I will be interested in researching. So these would inform me what I look for from literature. And these need to inform my literature sets, my keywords, conservation of plants, conservation of animals, conservation of soil, water conservation, conservation of biodiversity. Those are my keywords. At the same time, you should not confuse being comprehensive with being exhaustive. Yeah, there it is now. Comprehensive means citing relevant literature from appropriate areas. Now, I am comprehensive, but with exhaustive, I want to cite everything on a given topic. You cannot cite everything on a given topic. If you do that, you just want to read every literature. to just have a list to include everybody that they've said this, they've said, but what value does it bring to you? Enough should be enough. Eh? We just want to provide an overview of the literature. There are very few instances where a student would be required to undertake an exhaustive, you see, citing everything on the given topic. Eh? It's only on rare occasion that students will be reviewed to do that, although it may be essential while she or he is undertaking detailed systematic of literature reviews. Hey, this sentence is not well written. But there is now another question following that one of saturation. It says, how many sources does it take to accomplish that? Eh? If I say I've reached saturation, what is the quantity of those that I've consulted? Well, how many are they? Santos knows, depending on the purpose of the review, 12 to 15 sources are minimum, but that it is more about the quality of the source, not the quantity. Eh? The quality counts, is more heavier than the quantity, because a person might have cited a lot, but he might have said nothing, or he must have not used the correct information that is relevant to the topic or that supports the topic. Or maybe he can't even write, he just takes statements and dumps them without analyzing them. He is not discussing. In general, more recent research is better. You see, now there, the previous argument, more recent research is better, last 5 years, but be aware that the first things that comes up in a search is not necessarily the best research. What kind of sources does it take to reach a saturation? That is another question by somebody, but it's supporting that one. How many? Heather finds that a literature review is complete when she reaches a saturation. Now, this is another supportive statement to the previous one, in that the search is not revealing anything drastically new. That is saturation. You see, you will remember, colleagues, when you collect data, I think some of you have conducted research before. If you are in the field and you are collecting data, when your informants, your respondents, tell you the same information that you were told by other people before, and there's nothing that is coming in, then maybe that is a saturation point that has been reached. And there's no need to continue to collect data if there's nothing new coming in, because it will take your time, it will take your money. So we don't have resources to waste. So that is why in saturation is also determined by the extent to which new information is revealed. If is not revealed, there's no need to continue to conduct literature search according to this author. Now, this author finds that this occurs often when she has a mix of the classic studies, colleagues. I tried to look for. I failed to get the better definition of classic studies. But what is classic? Is it not something old? I don't know. But they say it occurs when she has a mix of the classic and those that seem to have the biggest impact on the field. Oftentimes understood by the number of citations, but not necessarily so. And current research, then again, past 5 years is again emphasized. Let's just get the correct definition of classic, then we can use it to analyze what this statement says. Another one says, Cuevas knows it is time to stop searching for sources when he feels he has the material needed and can. Now, that is another criteria, colleagues. If you can make the argument for conducting the research nicely, is someone who thought that if he feels that he can make that argument, then he can even stop doing further literature search. Now, listen to the following statement, colleagues. Once there, I stop. I also ask, given the information in these sources, can I make an argument that the average person on the street can read and understand where I'm going and why? If so, I have the sources needed. So it means I can, even if I don't go further, I'll be able to answer the research question. I have got sources that support my study, my research project. This is what other people have said, and this might be guidelines, and it is food for thought when we take decisions, because it is us, the researchers, who are going to decide, I have enough, but or I don't have enough. So there is no specific number that was given. There was a person who said 15 or say 15 or 20. That person, that statement, comment, I don't buy into. But other statements are open for discussion. And let me go back to you who have asked how much and what is enough literature review. And I want your comment now to indicate if this food for thought can assist us to take a decision on how much, or there are some guidelines that we can live with. Let me open for you. You be the first, because you had asked the question. I want to know what you say at this stage after we've gone through the guidelines. You can speak.
I wanted to understand, or maybe, understand that part of the old sources myth. I would like to find out from you. Maybe I might have missed that part due to network connection glitches. Yes. Where do you draw a line regarding old sources? Because you'll find that some of the sources or some of the information that you require is not available within the current, like past 5 years thing that they normally like to use as a yardstick. So if you find valuable information that has been published older than 5 years, that you feel that it's worthy being used in your study, do you go for it? How do you draw the line? I just want to understand that part where you can say I can go up to this far, or maybe strictly I cannot take 5 sources, but then on the other hand, your study suffers because there isn't much in the current sources. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for asking that, because there is a literature, there's a source that I used. I started conducting literature review in 1997, but I cited a source by Harris, literature by Harris, 1929. You see, and it was 97. I think it might have been 70 years ago or more than 50 years ago, just because the topic that under investigation was not investigated by. So there was no source. So I'm unable to draw the line, because I felt that if I don't take that literature, I don't have any other source of information. So it's better to use that one. And I believed that people will understand it, because those old people, if something was written about the Venda culture in the past, then I felt it was very important, because in olden days, they depended on oral tradition. Then it was passed from the ancestors to the youth. But if it was written, then it was a treasure. And you must remember, other books, old books, they would be very expensive to access and to buy, just because they are seen as what do you call them? It's a term that they use for something that is very valued, like a treasure, that when you buy, old cars that people sell, you cannot buy it. It's very expensive, just because it is what do they call it? It's the terminology.
Antique.
Yeah, it's an antique. You see, an antique, you can't buy that. It will be very expensive, because you would have of the old Fords or the very first cars which were sold in America. You find there are only 3, and they are in museum. And if a person wants to sell it for a specific museum, they will have to pay a fortune. You see now, so we cannot downplay old literature, because in it there is a resource that is not available today. So, but I cannot encourage anybody to use old literature if it is not relevant. So let the studies determine and decide, assist you to decide that this is relevant, and it is going to make a contribution to the study. That is how I see it. That person who has asked a question about how much literature is not coming on, but I thought you would comment. I said when we finish, you must come on because you were the one asking the question. Do the guidelines make sense? The slides, the presentation, does it make sense? Okay, if the person cannot come in, maybe it's muted or he has disappeared, we can continue to the next session. Let me go back to the presentation so that we put it on the presentation mode again. And there is something that I found on literature. It says someone has already focused on my topic. And the reason why I brought this subject here is because when we started the workshop last week, was it last week? Yes, we said the use of literature is also to assist in deciding on the research topic. But sometimes, even when you have a research topic, actually you start literature, reviewing your literature based on the literature topic. And I said this also. But the other thing, which is a challenge, is when you review literature, there's a likelihood that you find that this topic has already been focused on by somebody. And that is a hump that you need to deal with. Do you drop the topic? Do you want to take another one? What about if when you drop it, you go and find that every topic that you decide you try has also been researched? Then it forced me to take this section and present it today. And I want to read this very first one here. I just made an extract. It says, at times, while summarizing primary sources, you will discover that others have already addressed your topic and research question. Maybe even multiple parties have done so. Do not despair because of that. A literature review shapes the research question. Now, it means even if I have my research question, the literature review can assist me to refine it or to improve it or to revise it. If you have a research question in mind, then reading through the literature may indicate the need to revise there you are, to revise the question. This is just part of the continuous cycling back that research entails, because research is a iterative process. It is a to and fro process, to fro until you put a full stop and you do that executive summary or an abstract. It is also an example of a bump. Can you please mute? Please mute. It is also an example of a bump in the road that must be dealt with. Research is not purely linear, and bumps in the road are common. How can reviewing the literature aid in refining a research question? First, reading about existing studies focused on the same research question should reveal gaps in our understanding that require additional attention. Perhaps the research question has been considered broadly, but not for women, juveniles, the poor, or single individuals. Second, understanding the details about the methodology used in prior work may indicate an opportunity to revisit the topic using improved or an alternative methodology. For an example, someone may have studied a topic using a small local sample, which means the findings may not accurately describe a larger population. But if I then broaden my topic, then the findings will be different, will be applicable to a larger population. It may be that the same research question can be addressed using a larger national survey that has recently become available. Third, a review of the literature on a particular topic may reveal that our existing understanding about the topic is outdated. So it means when we are reading, we are actually discovering a new, improving our understanding. So it is better to base our research topic on the on recent and current discussion, on the current discourse about the topic and about the discipline where one is undertaking research. This may indicate that a new examination of this old question can increase our current understanding of the topic. Yes, that's very important. A new study focused on the same question may be possible using newer or improved data. Yes. Or the new study may take place in a different context than the extant work. Say, for instance, following a major policy change, such as the legislation of marijuana in several states. In addition, existing work may have used simplistic analytic approaches because greater computing power was not available at the time of the original research. It may be that examining this research question using more powerful analytical software available today will lead to an enhanced understanding of the issue. In short, if your topic has been studied, look for gaps in it. Look for gaps in our understanding or ways that the work can be improved. The other thing that I can mention here is that you must remember, even if something was studied, previous authors, if it was a research, they at the recommendation, at a section, there is a section where they indicate future studies. That is why they recommend what should be studied. And there's nothing wrong in taking that recommendation and run with it, because you are actually enhancing and advancing the topic. You are actually enhancing and extending the understanding in terms of that topic. So this is how a topic is decided. So there is no need for us to feel despair and to try and drop the ball just because our topic were focused on by other researchers. I also want to pause here because that we've come to the end of that, the discussion about the topic that has been focused on by someone else, before we come to the organizational approach. And I'm giving an opportunity for comments as well as questions that might be posed.
Yeah, on the issue of a topic that has been already researched on, but then you find that the author, as you correctly pointed out, indicates some limitations or recommend additional work that can be done to further that particular topic. My question would be, say for example, you find that the methodology that was used in that specific research was a bit limited, and you feel it could have been expanded and involved other stakeholders or other angles to explore the topic comprehensively. If you were to do that, in terms of the topic, how do you coin it in such a way that it is not exactly the same topic as the one that you are trying to expand? In terms of methodology and other research question, you might be able to do that, but the question, the title or the research topic, how then do you avoid repeating exactly the same? Thanks.
You see, sometimes I don't know how to say it, but in the topic you can, if something was not a case study, you can say a case study of something, or you can make reference to what you think the study should focus on. And then you can just add, you can tweak it a little bit. But apart from the topic, there are a number of sections where you can you can justify justification of the study or significance of the study, motivations. Under the problem of statement, you also have to motivate why you you want to undertake the research, what is the gap? What do you expect to bring? The body of knowledge that you think you're gonna bring, is what are you going to add? And those areas, I think it is where you can you can make sure that you are deviating and you are running away from the topic. But I don't know how to word it better. When there is one study here that I was conducting in 2019, it was completed. I was going through it. In it, I was testing a theory of organization and organizational studies. The supervisor advised that even at the topic, I can make specific mention of the theory. And it was, the study was on the establishment of catchment management agencies in South Africa. And there, my studies was going to focus on organizational design. So the topic read, the establishment of catchment management agencies in South Africa. Then colon, an organizational design perspective. So we can say specific interest on da methodology, or specific interest on da aspects. Then it means we then showing that we are either expanding what was done earlier on, or we're doing something different from what was done earlier on. That is how I think I can comment. The lady who made the comments about the use of old literature, and an example of the medical discipline, and where she made reference to HIV, she made a very good example. And I think I wanted to come in again when we finish presenting here, because here, that is where we will touch the chronological order of organizing literature. Literature that is old, literature that was used chronologically in terms of the time frames, because that is what chronological refers to, and how that is organized. It would be the latter part of this section. Recall that the purpose of literature review is to give an overall view of literature as it pertains to the proposed research. I think this statement is repetitive. I've read it earlier on. In addition, the literature review needs to make clear what addition to the literature the proposed study will make. What will the proposed study bring to the body of knowledge? Doing that is accomplished using one of two primary organizational structures. The first one is descriptive organization. The second one, chronological organization of the literature that has been reviewed. A descriptive literature review organization identifies and describes the major elements of a particular topic. It describes, it's only about description. It shares with the reader what is known about the topic currently. This type of review typically does not present how understanding about a topic has changed over time. That is not the focus of descriptive organization. Descriptive organization describes what is currently known, and it informs the reader about what is known. For an example, a descriptive literature review focused on organizational design may discuss pillars on which organizational design is based. The literature review could be organized in the following way. This is an extract. The red is what I took from one of the studies that I referred to, the establishment of catchment management agencies in South Africa, an organizational design perspective. And I went to literature review to make an extract of this to indicate how descriptive organization would look like, how it is organized. So in other words, it presents sections that under which you describe the different concepts departmentalization. These are all pillars that build the organization. So the first one could be put as a subsection to read departmentalization. The other one, second, line and staff functions. Third, centralization and decentralization. Fourth, division of work and job specialization. Subsection 5, chain of command, and 6, span of control. We can describe what these mean and what they are and what is understood currently on what they mean and what they are or how they are used. But the seventh one, we can indicate the proposed study and why it is important. This is how the descriptive organization would look like, but this is different from the chronological one. Okay, but let's first finish how it is described. The organization of this literature review describes the currently identified main themes. The themes, those pillars were reduced into themes because under them I had to discuss literature that talks about what is, for an example, what is departmentalization, what is line and staff function. There were paragraphs and paragraphs under each of them. So this is how organizational approach is used. Then it describes currently identified themes presented in the subsections. And this is followed by what the proposed research will add to our understanding and why it is important to conduct it. Subsections with headings are very useful in that they allow you to organize the information and helps the reader. After reading this descriptive format literature review, the reader will have a good understanding of what is known, as well as information on why the proposed research is important. But chronological is different from descriptive approach, because a chronologically organized literature review describes changes and growth in understanding of a topic over the time. That is where I said the example of HIV in health was very, very useful today, because there we need to understand the changes in the improvement of technology to deal, or medical technology to deal with the pandemic HIV. And maybe the extent to which the technology saved the lives of the people that are affected, that are positive with HIV. So this is done in the literature that is done for that purpose. It's referred to as chronological approach. As the name suggests, you would describe earlier studies first, when the pandemic first was identified in South Africa or was experienced, or when it first occurred. Then if there were documents or literature that was written by then, it is very, very important. We start by it. Then more contemporary ones, literature, maybe 5 years after the pandemic was there, because even the understanding and the interaction with the pandemic was different from when it first occurred. And then a section identifying the proposed research and why it is important to conduct. For an example, a chronologically organized literature review focused on violence against college women may discuss how our understanding of this topic has changed over time. So our example is how our understanding of the pandemic of HIV has improved over the time. Using a chronological organization should identify changes in the understanding of a subject over time. And I think we are understanding this because it is very, very straightforward. The change over time can be focused on the substantive changes in understanding, changes in methodological advances, or changes resulting from theoretical developments. Now, the earlier question that was talking about if the new topic wants to use more advanced methodologies or technologies, how do we phrase the topic? So it means it is possible that methods can be the reasons can be elements of changes, because how things were done in the past have changed. Now we've got new technology, so even the approach and the procedure of doing things has changed. The way in which heart surgery was done during the time of Chris Barnard might have evolved over time, and today it might be executed differently. The surgery is executed differently. Which type of change over time is focused on is dependent on the purpose of the proposed research. There it is. You see, the type of change over time is dependent on the purpose of the proposed research. When I made reference to the old literature and the interest of the student who wants to study the history of the Zulu culture, then I even indicated, if you want to study the past only, 1829 to 1890 only, you're not coming to 1920, then it means the logic is only limited to the past time, to the past tense only. It started, it refers to the past and it ends in the past. Should you decide to organize your literature review using a chronological methodological approach, you might offer a section discussing foundational methodology tools. And there, that is where you also use foundational literature, followed by a section devoted to advanced methodologies. There, you are also using literature that has reported advanced methodologies that became available. And finally, a section focused on current understanding using the most up-to-date tools. These up-to-date tools are described in today's literature, which is recent. It can be yesterday or today, 2024, 2023, not very old. But the foundational, this would have been preceded by foundational methodological tools. So the latest that has to be written in terms of the logic is the most up-to-date tools. Presented in this fashion, a reader can see raw understanding in the field. How understanding in the field has grown over time. Furthermore, it makes clear how the proposed research will build on what is currently known. A word of caution is chronological organization or any kind does not mean that a researcher should simply offer summaries of each author's research in the order in which they were published. Rather, the researchers must write the review based on major periods of understanding in the field. So periods are the important logic. So information comes in front of the periods. So in this period, this is how the understanding of HIV was. But today, in the recent periods, we understand HIV like this, which is better than before. The periods are the topic. Yeah, here is the guideline. The periods are the topic, and the individual pieces of research are synthesized to provide support for what occurred in each time period. And the individual pieces that they're talking about is information that comes from books that were written in different times. So we would have written subsections, our subsections would be written in terms of the period. So in each period, we then write what we then present what was written by different authors who wrote about the topic or about the aspect in that time. So they are saying the periods are the topic. Now, that is the end of the organization. And if there is any comment, then we can make. And I appreciate that the lady who made the comments on HIV and the logic of conducting the literature in terms of the age makes that comment if she is able. And anybody can also make comments. Here, the writing strategy, we are advised to at the end put down the searches that we have. In other words, we are writing up now those summaries that I referred to as abstracts. Abstracting literature, summarizing literature. Is the time now to take all those summaries and use them now to compile literature research, to write it up. Now they propose a strategy which they refer to as meal. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a lovely evening.